Hello, good morning from Singapore, and to friends tuning in from India. Thank you and welcome to today's session where we'll be talking about the deep tech for good in Asia. My name is Wei Bin from SGInnovate. We are a government-owned organization in Singapore who believes in the positive impact of deep tech to benefit humanity. A good part of our work also involves building a global community of scientists, commercializing research, building deep tech talents, as well as working with our ecosystem partners in scaling deep tech for improving the lives of many around the world. And that is why we have formed this community where our work in investing in startups, corporate collaborations, and promoting knowledge sharing enable us to scale and build deep tech innovations for the world. Today, we are very happy to partner with the Federation of India Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI for short, to present to you this webinar in support of Deep Tech for Good, which is an SGInnovate initiative to gather experts in science and technology, entrepreneurship, academia, government, and international affairs to reimagine the boundaries of research-based innovation, catalyze collaborations among corporates, startups, and governments, and advance deep tech developments for social and economic good. Singapore has been on very good relations with India, and we have done great things in areas of trade facilitation, commerce, and customs. And with India being one of the top 3 nations in its startup capabilities, we look deeper into how deep tech innovation can be harnessed to address the base of pyramid issues and how Singapore is also doing the same for social good. So just to let everyone know, if any part of the time during the event, feel free to just say hi using the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Or if you have any questions for our speakers, please do use the Q&A box to voice out some of the questions that you might have, so that our moderator will be able to use the Q&A box to answer some of these questions. To kickstart this session, allow me to invite Mr. Dilip Chanoy, Secretary General of the FICCI, for opening remarks. Mr. Dilip, please.
Thank you, Wayman. First of all, a very good morning to people in Singapore and in the ASEAN and also in India. It is my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined this webinar. FICCI is privileged to partner SGInnovate in this series on deep tech. And as Wayman mentioned, Singapore and India have a very deep relationship. Our office in FICCI office in Singapore, headed by Navita, who is also on this webinar, partners with organizations and the governments in Singapore to build Singapore-India relations. I would like to specially welcome the esteemed panelists, Dr. Aloknath Dey, who's the CTO of Samsung India, Mr. Avnish Sabharwal, Managing Director, Accenture Ventures, Mr. Bidyut Damra, Executive Director and Head of Innovation, DBS, and of course, Ms. Phi, Chairperson of the Vietnam Angel Network. A very, very good morning. Typically, deep tech before, just a few years before, and even now with the advent of digital technology, is viewed with a lot of suspicion. It is viewed as an invasion to privacy, and normally the debates swing on one side. But deep tech, and in the COVID era, it has actually proved to be a boon. In India, it has been used as the backbone for our own Arogya Setu, which is a COVID app, which is on most mobile phones in India. A lot of algorithms and technology has been used to quickly ramp up productions of things like ventilators, face masks, and PPE equipment, as also sanitizers. So the whole tech for social good is being actually seen in a very, very different light in this COVID era. And we believe that going forward, the applications of deep tech would, as women talked about, in areas of agriculture, healthcare, urban planning, transportation, you name it, you would find a very important use for it. To each of the panelists, a very special welcome and thank you. You bring to this webinar a different kind of perspective from the industry and the sector. You are, each one of your firms is leading in groundbreaking and scalable science. Of course, deep tech is reimagining the boundaries of social innovations. FICCI and the government are promoting a whole group of startups in India across different social sectors on using deep tech and how do you actually use this to benefit society and humanity as we go forward. It is an opportunity when the work that we do in this era will not only impact what we do currently and our generation, but will actually determine the future of mankind. And therefore, the more we focus on this area, the more solutions we get, and we build this whole collaborative framework as SGInnovate is doing in Singapore. How do we build these collaborations across boundaries, across countries, will greatly enable us to scale deep tech for good and catalyze collaborations amongst governments, corporates, and startups. We believe that the new and bold applications of deep tech have ability and potential to ensure sustainable, livable future for the planet in the face of all the different challenges, and more importantly, will enable us to create a playbook on how do we handle such situations in the future. So once again, a very warm welcome to all the panelists, a very special thank you from FICCI to SGInnovate and to the panelists, and a very warm welcome to all the viewers of this very special session on deep tech for social good in Asia. Thank you and have an enjoyable session.
I guess that is the cue for me. So good morning, everybody. My name is Avnish Sabarwal. I'm the Managing Director for Accenture Ventures and Open Innovation Program in India. We basically partner, invest, and acquire deep tech startups in areas around AI, ML, deep learning, quantum computing, Internet of Things, and cybersecurity, amongst other technologies. And we work very closely with our entire open innovation ecosystem, not only in India, but in ASEAN and other parts of the world as well. So I think it's, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all, and I hope you and your family and friends are keeping safe. These are very difficult times. So I wish all of you are well, and I welcome you to this very, very interesting panel. And we have a great set of panelists as well. Unfortunately, one of them had to drop off due to a personal issue, but we are confident that we will be able to make up for that and give you a very enriching experience. So I'd just like to say a few words to set the context, and then we will dive right into the panel. So I think, you can't not talk about the coronavirus pandemic. I think it has single-handedly impacted our world like no other event before, at least to all the people who are on this panel. In our lifetime, we have not seen anything like this. And it has really given us a warning that status quo no longer exists, right? Rich and poor, the pandemic has forced us to reconsider almost every aspect of how we live and work. In fact, human behavior of almost 4 billion people has changed overnight. UNDP estimates the global human development, which is a combination of education, health, and living standards, could fall this year for the first time since 1990, when measurements began. So the pandemic presents an enormous challenge for reaching the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. The crisis has negatively impacted SDGs related to poverty, hunger, access to healthcare and education, and inequality. So that is the world in which we are operating. That is the context of this particular panel as well. So the question then is, how can deep tech and technology help? Now, if you look at the history, technology has always helped us to meet challenges in the past as well, right? From printing press to steam engines, electricity, etc., right? more than 4 billion of us are now connected to the internet. Mobile devices of today, the smartphone, the more powerful than the computers used on the Apollo 11 spacecraft. So now we have access to all these exponential technologies at a very, very reasonable cost. Technologies like AI, blockchain, extended reality, and quantum computing that can hold incredible potential to transform lives. And this is already happening. In fact, the kind of innovation which I have seen in deep tech in the last 7 to 8 months, I probably have not seen in the last 5 to 8 years, right? Right from, as Mr. Chenoy was talking about how deep tech is being used to address the business and human impact of COVID, things around, for example, telemedicine, low-cost diagnostics, all these are happening through a lot of innovation in health tech. Similarly, the other industry where deep tech has made a profound impact in the last few months would be ed tech, right? As education has moved online again almost overnight, and we have again a lot of innovation happening. But besides that as well, governments, other agencies have all been working together and leveraging deep tech. China, where it all started, has also leveraged huge amount of deep tech. For example, drones and robotics in their hospitals to make sure that there is no more infection when you are interacting with the patient. So very innovative use cases have come out of deep tech addressing pandemic. Now that's not enough, right? So the need for human organizations to come together is a single big challenge which still needs to be solved. And even if you look at how the countries are coming together, and how the final solution of this whole thing will be solved, it is around collaboration. So deep tech does not happen in isolation. You have to collaborate across ecosystems. So technology or deep tech is not a silver bullet, and no single organization can solve the massive societal challenge that we face today. So enterprises, research organizations, deep tech startups, academia, government institutions all need to come together as part of an open innovation ecosystem to solve the challenge and help achieve the SDG goals. At Accenture, we believe in shared success, and our CEO, Julie Sweet, is committed to the cause of Accenture being a responsible business that creates shared value to benefit everybody. And examples of some of these initiatives are SDG Ambition. Accenture has also partnered with the UN Global Compact and SAP to challenge and support companies in integrating the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals in their core businesses. From where I come, Accenture Ventures has just recently launched a Black Founders Development Program and a fund as well. And we are very, very focused on skills to succeed, inclusion and diversity, and other aspects where deep tech can be deployed. So that's just a little context in terms of the environment in which we are operating and why deep tech can make a significant impact. So with this, I would like to dive into the panel and go straight to my distinguished panelists. And I'll open up a generic question to all of you to answer. And that would be like, what do you think will be the short-term and long-term impact of the current pandemic on the deep tech for good domain? So is this going to accelerate deep tech? And what do you think are the profound impacts of the pandemic on deep tech? So Dr. Alok, if you can start, and then we can have all the other panelists comment as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I think a brief introduction. So I'm representing Samsung. We are in 25th year in India. We are the largest outside South Korea, and also one of the largest patent filer in India. So as CTO, my responsibility, if I have to simplify, is research to commercialization. This drive that Avnish you mentioned, that's my responsibility. There are two parts. One is the in-house innovation of the 5G, of the multimedia, AI, IoT, all the work in the center of excellence that we do. And the other is the open innovation. Obviously, the startups fall into it, the universities. And last year, we launched a Samsung Ventures Fund in India, and we have invested in many Indian companies on top of the global ones. I also had a responsibility on the AI, IoT, big data intersection. That's my specialty. The lab here in AI, IoT, as well as I had a lab in Korea on the big data part of it. So that's my special focus as we drive the overall delivery from Samsung. So with that note, I think one of the important things in this topic is deep tech, and what are these global development challenges that you are talking, and particularly in the time of pandemic. So my definition of deep tech, I mean, if I just take a couple of them, we don't want to list all of them, but AI, applied, the data intelligence is applied to many. And we can see initially it was descriptive. And from there now it is becoming very prescriptive and predictive kind of, environment. Starting from logistics to biomedical, all of these cases, we can see that there is an application. We talk about 5G in last 1 year from Samsung, whether it is on the network side, or we probably have launched a dozen smartphones on 5G itself. And these are being deployed for B2B smart factories. You can see the auto ancillary products that we have, and how can you detect in real time if there is a crack in the product, and you can stop there, to going to the consumer into B2C. And then blockchain, peer-to-peer money transfer to governance, all these are falling into the deep tech. The other side of the story of the theme today is the social good, the global development challenges. And Avnish, you mentioned about UN SDG, and one of them is talking about good health and well-being. One is talking about clean water and sanitation. There is affordable and clean energy. There are 17 goals. Not in all of them, obviously, technology can solve. Some problems are deeper than the deep tech. Let me put it this way. But deep tech can solve few of them. Now the question is, why do you need to apply, and what is it, the power of deep tech that we are going into this social sector? So I see, when you look into commercial application, logistics, biomedical, I talked about few of them. What is it, the underlying threat? For example, if I take AI, the ability to predict is the key part. So if I can take that ability to predict of AI and utilize it into the social causes where masses will be benefiting, where affordability will come, that becomes very interesting. Ability to personalize, right, in genomic research. When you combine such ability to predict in agriculture, it can become precision agriculture. And that can give some food safety and security aspect of it. When I look into 5G, it's being a very hot topic and it will come. But one is, yeah, you download at a faster speed, great. You deploy in the factory. But again, ability to communicate faster with high speed, with low latency, that can be leveraged in the social good. And for example, in today's processing power, I can see even a radiological graph in the smartphone quite clearly. Earlier, it used to be patchy and I didn't know how to read that in the phone. But with the kind of quality of camera that we have, you can read it. And now, not just you are able to do that, you are able to transmit it far off, that radiological data. So therefore, a person who is living in a rural area doesn't even need to come. And this whole remote provisioning of healthcare is becoming a reality. So that's the power of 5G that we could leverage. And the third thing I mentioned about blockchain is also in the governance. What is it that we are bringing? It's the ability to trust an unknown entity, an unknown person. That's the power of blockchain. It's about a distributed system. And yes, you can do all this cryptocurrency and things like that. That's great. But on the other hand, I can take that benefit and immediately form a social group and have some direct benefit transfer or a communication on a certain problem in a trusted way, that even though I don't know those people. So I think these power of the technology in this context, if we can bring it. Yeah, in the pandemic context, we have much more contactless. We are bringing much more cloud technology, and we can go on the list. But this is, I think, the power. And I would like to leave the first round of discussions with the thought that it's not always also the cyber tech part of it. There are deep tech. We should not misunderstand when I give the example of AI, 5G, blockchain. It's not just that, but even in the physical world. For example, there is water crisis, and clean water is an important part. And you talk about desalination. Sea water, I mean, 2/3 of the world is water, right? So there is no crisis. It's just that how do I leverage that water from sea? And I see the Israel companies that have done this desert land, and they just started doing there. And now affordability, scalability, they are bringing 400 plants in India, in China, and many other places, removing the salt and minerals and making the water affordable. Smaller examples of groundwater supplies. I see some example, very interesting in Morocco, small village in a mountain, foothill, and they don't have it, and they put a fog catcher. All the fog that comes in a very systematic way. It may sound like a jugaad in India, but this jugaad is also, if you structure it right, the small incremental innovation that is there, that problem is not unique, just there, but you can scale it up, structure it nicely, and can bring it to society at large. I think I'll stop here for the first round, and if you have other questions, we'll come back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alok. I think that was a very insightful, information in terms of how deep tech is helping solve not only the SDG problems, but also problems coming out of pandemic and then broader societal issues as well. So with this, I'd like to go to Fee, to you, if you can also give a quick introduction to yourself and what you do. And then also talk about in your, I'll also like you to define what do you think is the definition of deep tech, and how do you think that has, been a true force multiplier in bringing social development, let's say in Vietnam. So maybe a quick introduction, definition of deep tech, and then how do you think has been the impact till now?
Thank you, Avnish. First of all, so my name is Phi Van, and I'm the chairwoman of Vietnam Angel Network. I probably say two things about deep tech for good. First of all, I've never actually sit in that many judging competition using deep tech to actually solve the issues that we're facing at the moment, exactly the pandemic, not only from the government, but also from the UN and a lot of NGOs from Vietnam. We have been working with each other to create a lot of opportunities for startup in the deep tech sectors to actually create solutions, social solutions for our pandemic in Vietnam, and it has been pretty successful. Secondly, I've never seen that many people in the investment community, especially VCs and angel investors, so interested into deep tech as in moving forward, seeing it as the way of the future. So we talk a lot about AI, machine learning. 5G is also a hot topic here in Vietnam. We just did a really big 5G webinar with the government the other day. Anything that's helping to basically helping in healthcare, helping in education, helping in resolving social problems that we have at the moment because of the pandemic has been the #1 on our list at the moment. Moving forward, I think the pandemic is not going to go away very soon. So I have seen, and I have been talking to a lot about investors in the community here, and I have seen the trend of investors getting funding together and investing more into any deep tech companies, especially in the healthcare sector, education sector, in payments, so fintech, blockchain, to help moving us forward into integrating into that future where probably is never going to go back to social to the social norms that we used to know. That is where that is my perspective, and also that is what we are seeing in Vietnam as in moving forward into investing into startups, investing into social problems or social programs. I also head and initiate a Deep Tech for Good initiative in Vietnam. I'm going to share a bit more in details with you later on. But I myself am an angel investor. So during the first 7 months of 2020, I think I've never actually invested into deep tech before. Before it was basically more on e-commerce, more on digital transformation, more on very tech-enabled sort of businesses in Vietnam, because we're a very young ecosystem, so deep tech is not there yet. We're only at the starting point of deep tech, but for the first 7 months of 2020, I already invested into 2 AI companies in Vietnam. So you can see there's a lot of potential and there's a lot of interest from Vietnam into this particular sector.
Thank you very much, Fee. I think I completely resonate with you in a couple of points, which you mentioned. One is that, the pandemic has definitely accelerated innovation in a couple of industries, which you talked about, right? I think healthcare and edtech, especially, they were on the periphery of digital transformation earlier, right? They were always threatening to, explode. But the momentum was not there. And I think the pandemic has given significant momentum to both health tech and ed tech, and you are right, in fintech, especially with payments as well. So some industries, more than others, have significantly benefited from the pandemic. And I also agree with you on a few technologies also. You mentioned AI, but also blockchain, for example. Blockchain was another technology which was on the periphery, not really into the mainstream of organizations. But immediately in the pandemic, you can see that blockchain has also come into limelight, along with cybersecurity, because as millions of people started working from home, cybersecurity became a critical issue as well. So with that, I'd like to go to our third panelist, Vidyut. If you can give a quick introduction of yourself, what kind of work you are doing. You come from a very, very innovative bank. And also your perspectives on what you feel is deep tech and how it is solving the problem for social good.
Sure. Firstly, thank you, SGInnovate, to have me over here. I actually got a little bit of the imposter syndrome. I mean, looking at this panel, I don't even think I should be here. So forgive me if I say some questionable things. Okay, so for me, I work in the bank, DBS Bank. I look after innovation. And we've got a slight nuance to how we operate. So my job is actually, we have a rule that says no innovation allowed. My job is not to create innovations, but to create innovators. So I'm pretty much working on how I can create ambition and belief within the organization that anyone and everyone can be a change analyst. And that includes mindset, tool sets, and skill sets. Now, in regards to, I guess the question you asked on deep tech. So a lot of people will combine a lot of the new technologies, AI, Internet things, robotics, quantum computing, and they mash these together in regards to saying deep tech with a view of how these technologies can be very exponential. And we can stick with that definition for now. But again, I guess the key is that tech is simply an enabler. It's a tool. It's how you apply or what you apply it to. So it's that adage goes is that you can use nuclear physics and energy for good, or you can use it to create for destruction for bad. So from a point of, I guess, the short term and long term to the question that you asked, I mean, even I'm very interested to understand the psychological and the behavioral change. So even you mentioned at the start about how it's impacted the 4 billion people. And it's the 4 billion people who, of course, are connected to the internet. But actually, there's also a secondary impact of the people who are not connected, because it is changing the way people, I guess, organize themselves, the way people produce, the way people supply, the way people procure, etc. I mean, even personally for myself, over this period, I've reflected and I have changed, I feel, my values on what my own views on success is, what my own views on the relationships with my family is, my own views on how I interact and what is my responsibility to my colleagues. So if I take that personal impact that I have and then I look at it from a point of the fact that everyone is affected, it is fairly, I guess, profound how deep this COVID situation has or will change anyone and everyone. So even, it's interesting, we had this from a generation perspective. You had baby boomers, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. So I read this report of what they're saying is now the new Gen N. And Generation N is generation novel for the coronavirus, where it has taken a behavioral change across age, across demographics that are the traditional demographics, and it's pushed people to live and work in different ways. So even if you look from a short term, we've changed the way we live and the way we work. We're all sitting over here in home offices, but the long-term impact could be on how cities are developed, the urban development, on how real estate is valued, the short term of how organizations have had to change to their supply chains and how they procure, with a lot of trade routes being affected. The long-term impact could be very fundamental into geopolitical and macroeconomics. So I think we are just barely scratching the surface on how different the world is going to be and how these changes are slowly going to inch in. So they say that people talked about the new normal. Now everyone is bantering the never normal. So I guess that's my initial views.
So I think it's a very interesting statement you ended with Vidyut, because we just had our Accenture Ventures Challenge. We have it every year. And the title of that was Innovating in the Never Normal World, right? So we also agree that there is no new normal. It will be a never normal world. And the quicker we are able to adjust our mindset and behaviors to that, I think the better it will be. So I think that's a great round of, first introductions. I'll also just like to add my little bit in terms of a couple of things. One, there is always this question about, and Vidyut, you were talking about, right? You combine a few digital technologies and that becomes deep tech. I think a lot of people ask the question, what exactly is deep tech, right? And how is it different from technology? So in my own perspective, the way I describe deep tech is any technology which has been incubated over several years, right? It is not a technology which you can put and start selling shoes and clothes in 1 week's time. That is also technology, and it is a beneficial technology, but that, according to me, is not deep tech. So any technology which has either incubated in an academia space. In Israel, for example, a lot of these technologies incubate over years in the military space, and then they come out in the academia and then into the corporate. So what I'm saying is that these technologies need to be incubated sometimes over 2.5 years, if not more. They are all highly IP relevant, right? So there is a lot of IP in question. Again, in other technologies, you may not find that much of IP, but deep tech is all about IP. And the third thing which I like to mention is that these are trying to solve some very, very complex problems for humankind, business, and society, right? So these are the three things which I would like to mention in terms of what I call, what makes for a deep tech. So again, there is no right or wrong answer, but because this question is quite a lot of times asked, I just wanted to give you an example of that. I would also like to give an example of how deep tech has been used in Accenture so that we can make this whole thing very real for for our viewers, right? Because they might be thinking, okay, well, how is it being used for tech for good? So one of our NGO which we work with is called Akshay Patra in India, and basically it is responsible for providing midday meals for students in the school. So they came to Accenture with a very interesting problem, and they said, our problem definition is how can we feed more school children? That was it. That was the problem definition. And obviously we used our consultants and our technology labs and ventures, and we sat down and looked at the entire value chain of Akshay Patra. Now we looked into IoT technology, which is one of the deep tech technologies, to see how the food was being cooked and what was the for example the warmth or the healthiness which you could actually use to measure through the IoT sensors. So how the food was being cooked was done through IoT. How did you predict the demand from the schools was done through machine learning and AI. And then how did the school give feedback on the quality of food was done through blockchain. And so you can see here a small problem definition of how do we feed more school children was solved by bringing three of the top deep tech technologies together: AI, IoT, and blockchain. And we were able to release significant inefficiencies and come up with almost 1 million more children which we could feed. So this is for real. Deep tech can impact real societal and big challenges which we face today. So I just wanted to put that in context and also give a short definition of what deep tech is. Now, coming to...
Sorry, I agree, and yet I slightly disagree.
Yeah, sure.
I think from a deep tech perspective, it also comes down from an application perspective. So like you say, deep tech for good, I understand. But there is much more rampant use of deep tech for pure commercial purposes. And like say, for example, talking about IoT and talking about using AI, two scenarios. One is they looked at how they would track shipping containers and shipping vessels, and they used it in regards to looking at routes and lines, and it was used to optimize, it was used for insurance, it was used for financing, and also then there was a use for illegal fishing. Now, between both, we're using the exact same technology sets, all that have come out from universities, academia, the first two examples of what you said. But when it comes to application, the resources, the budget, the access that was put into creating the application for monitoring the ships for a commercial purpose, as opposed to what's put in for illegal fishing, chalk and cheese. And that's where I believe that there is a slight issue with how we use deep tech, because it is a set of technologies that comes in from the same set. So I'm not sure if I agree with that last point, but yes, I mean, in fundamental, the other, I mean, I'd like it to be used more from a good perspective, but I'm not sure that that's prevalent.
No, so actually I did not say that it was prevalent. I think that is the focus of the panel in terms of how to make it prevalent. What I'm trying to say is that while it is not prevalent, it is also not completely absent, right? So that was my point. The point is that big organizations like Accenture are solving very complex problems for the society using deep tech or an integration of deep tech technologies. And I wanted to bring it live to the audience that they don't think, one, that it is not prevalent, and secondly, that deep tech is only being used for commercial purposes. So I am actually going the complete opposite to what you said, that I am trying to give proof that it is prevalent and it is being used for the society. Right?
No problems.
I totally agree with you that a lot more has to be done, right? And that's where we were discussing about the pandemic, that some of these deep tech technologies which were in the periphery have been brought out in the forefront now and are being used for the society, which earlier were being more used for the commercial. So you made a very valid point there. I think pandemic, as you rightly said, has changed a lot of behavior and thinking. And that has transcended into how deep tech technology will be leveraged as well. So I think we are probably on the same page, saying it from two different point of views. So with this, let me go back to Dr. Alok. Dr. Alok, I'd like to ask you that, in terms of the Indian society, and you've been working quite a lot with deep tech and in Samsung. So where do you think, and which kind of technologies do you think have made the most impact? And could you also throw some light on some of the deep research and development, because you are responsible for that as well. So I think both from an ecosystem perspective, you mentioned about two kinds of innovation you started with. There's an outside-in innovation happening through the ecosystem, and there is a lot of innovation which is happening in a very innovative company like Samsung. So could you throw some light in terms of which of these technologies, both internal and external, do you think have made some significant impact in tech for good?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I think going back to the field, every field is trying to deploy the deep tech. I see it to some extent or the other. FinTech, as we said, the blockchain. I mean, the FinTech in India, the digital transformation has quite a lot happened. But this pandemic time, we see even fewer new technologies on the contactless part, on the blockchain part that are getting merged. EduTech, it was all classrooms. Suddenly we went home and online has come. Now, short term, this is one story. In long term, somewhere it will settle down. At least people would learn that this is an opportunity. This is another way of doing, and they will take a sweet point. 80% you have to come to classes, and maybe 20% you can do from home, even post COVID time. Where I see the long-term impact of the deep tech is the health tech, because the health issues, it is so vital to us. It's not, education is also important, but first is our body and being intact. And people have become much more health conscious during this time because of COVID, the immunity system, the exercise. Some didn't do it in the beginning, but I see deeply people are starting to take care of their health. And on the other hand, a lot of devices with processing power, they are becoming available. For example, even in Samsung, you asked me some examples from there. We did 2 years back. In the smartphone itself, we have accelerometer, gyrometer, magnetometer. With these things, yeah, I can do how much we are running. I can measure many other things. But if I combine it rightly, we built a blood pressure measurement by just these PPG sensors that you have, right? I mean, each of these devices have many sensors. So you can have a light sensors through which we detected even the ultraviolet exposures on the skin. And you can even get to commercial if you wish to recommend a cream that you should use, which SPF to use. But even if you don't do that, you know your color, textures, and through the UV exposures. So going back to the point that health tech, starting from blood pressure to glucose, many non-invasive, even if it is not the last solutions, it's not to replace the doctors, but screening mechanisms are going to be in place. People are, I talked about, the remote healthcare provisioning that you can access from different places. So this is one area that I see a lot of growth that is happening. Some of the other things I wanted to give examples is sometime back, I saw that the Aadhaar, when it was launched, already it had provision for fingerprint, but also iris. But iris was not getting used. And this is a deep tech iris processing. And at that time, even in Samsung, we didn't have a commercial product. And I just thought, if I can marry this deep tech, and already Aadhaar had enrollment, and next stage of that, people would like to get services. That means you need an integrated device. So if I can bring iris processing inside a tablet or a phone, then suddenly I can make this available in the Indian context. And I must say that device that we did 5 years back, even though it was running out of life, But in this pandemic time, we had to they gave special permission to extend its life so that people can use it for direct benefit transfer. I want to give one more example on the financial side. We built Knox. This is a security that every device should have. When I look into this microfinancing and the people are getting loans, one of the challenge, nobody would like to run something that they would be loss making, right? It's not a charity. If it's a charity, that's different, but you want to do a social enterprise. One of the challenges, some people do not pay back, and then therefore I'm afraid to get into this venture. When we understood that, we said, oh, Knox as a security. So if somebody is not paying an EMI, I can block it, I can give some notifications, bring them in softly. You can bring the social dimension to it, but technology can provision to do it. Suddenly, with this technology, I can say that so many microfinance institutions have adopted that SDK and with the devices and enabled this financing, which in turn brings the society's productivity and new businesses from this bottom of the pyramid segment. We did two more examples I can give. One with the same technology. Now, this I want to give an example, a deep tech that we have been using for commercial purposes, and there has been investment. And this bridges some of the point Vidyut was trying to tell, and you have been highlighting. Yes, it needs the deep tech part of it. It has to have the entry barrier. It has to have the IP. Otherwise, you are not having that. It has to be nurtured over time. So one such technology is object detection, classifications, that even smartphone, you just point it out, you can see what object, you can see multiple objects. We have in our fridge, family hub. Inside, you can look through the camera, what are the vegetables that's there, you can do recipe recommendation. Now that's the commercial part. So my thought process has been that if I have invested already commercially in this technology, the first part of investment is difficult. But now that I have this technology, can I use it for some social good? So what I did is we created a C-Lab kind of environment and told that this technology is available. What can you do for social good? And two things that came up very interestingly, I must say that BBMP in Bangalore, which is like city, municipality, corporations, for others' benefit to understand, we just thought waste segregation, people don't do it. But I can point to that and just tell this is plastic, this is paper, and sometimes it is doubtful product that you don't know which bucket to put it. Even if you have 3 buckets, you don't know exactly, right? So I can just point it. And what we added is, oh, instead of this, you could have used a separate material for that. So it's a education for long term, but short term, I can point it out and give that. So this is something interesting that we have tried and deployed. The other thing, last point I wanted to highlight, in the same technology, then I thought, why not the agricultural side of it? And the important thing is, you know, a lot of brokerage, the middlemen that are there and the farmers don't always get the right price because they say it's not broken grains, but people say it's broken and that's the price you can get, right? And they have no choices. But they needed a technology support that says, no, it's not. My accuracy of the broken to right grains is whatever, 20:80, right? That's what I deserve. So same technology of object detection with much more refinement. My CNN deep tech from 20 layer, I had to increase it. But nonetheless, I could now start saying that, yes, you don't have it, and therefore you deserve a higher price. Now, obviously, as I said, only deep tech cannot solve, but it gives a tool to speak on your behalf. And probably, you know, it will bring transparency in the system and we can take it forward. So I can go on a long list, but I think I have given some examples how we are applying the deep tech in commercial, bringing that to social good purposes. And obviously the packaging, the scalability, the affordability, that has to be there, the accuracy that's needed. At the same time, what Vidyut was saying, yes, the investment doesn't happen so this is one way to offset. Obviously, we need philanthropic funding and other kind of investments. Fivan talked about 2 angel investments she has done. That's great. So that will happen. But this is one avenue from big corporations that we could leverage for doing goods. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alok. I think very pertinent points, both in terms of what Samsung has been doing and how you have actually pivoted some of the commercial technologies into social goods. So I think that's an excellent point. I'd like to come back to you, Vidyut, because you made a very relevant point in terms of the prevalence of deep tech for solving societal problems, and that enough is not happening there. In fact, if you look at the whole concept of deep tech, and because we only work with deep tech startups, hundreds of them, the sales cycle of deep tech, even for commercial, is very long, right? So that's a very long, and you are probably the consumer of some of those, so you probably would know, right? And secondly, the propensity for the client to pay for deep tech is not that great, to be honest, right? And I'm talking about from a commercial perspective at the moment. Now, if you turn that thing into societal, obviously the things are even more worse, right? So how do you actually, I'm putting the question back to you, how do you make this prevalent? For example, if you look deep tech startups, right? How do you motivate deep tech startups to do more the kind of work, like, for example, I gave the example of what we did with Akshay Patra. How can we have hundreds of Akshay Patra examples? But how do you make it sustainable for the startup, which has, for example, incubated for 2-3 years and now needs to obviously also answer to their investors as well? What are your views on that? How do we solve this problem? We know it's a problem, but how do we solve it?
So I'll approach it from two different angles. And actually, the question you're asking me is something I was actually going to put to Dr. Aloknath. But so you've hijacked. But nevertheless, let me have a starting crack at
also answer after that.
So one is I look at deep tech. Let me look at 2 aspects. One is, let's talk about the creators of deep tech. Let's talk about the people that are creating, because if we say deep tech is a tool, quantum computing, AI, etc., you've got the large tech organizations and houses that are building these for people to use. One is, I think it's awesome that nearly everyone from Amazon to Google to Azure, all their workbenches, to a certain extent, they're democratizing it. They have an understanding that these are extremely powerful tools, and putting it in the hands of many. One is for them, of course, they have let's say, an agenda of making sure that that's the most used, but at the same time, there is a democratization which allows people to use it for different things, which is why so many startups have hands on such great technology. But nevertheless, one is, okay, so for the creators of deep tech, I think there's a role that the creators have to also assume on how they can guard their tools from being misused. And it comes down to the fundamental of, I cannot ensure that people will use the technology for good, but I have to ensure that they cannot use it for harm. And I don't believe that a lot of tech providers or people that are working in this space, even from an academia perspective, they approach it from that side. And so one is a call out to all creators of deep tech. The ability to create safeguards at the onset is one that people should start looking at doing. Because once you come downstream to corporates, they say most corporates are motivated by greed and fear. So that comes down to this human base emotion. But okay, but what is the role for corporates? Now, again, so I was really tweaked by the example that Dr. Aloknath gave about the fridge. Now, I have seen 2 variants of how the deep tech has been used. One where it was used where it would look at how a family was consuming goods and how they were taking things out of the fridge. And it was linking back into the ecosystem of being able to restock the fridge to make sure that the family always had food. So that was one. I saw another where I can say it was a little bit more conscious on how they were using the technology, where the function was more, it would look at all the contents of the fridge and it would look at how things are expiring, and it would suggest recipes to how to optimize what was in the fridge so you don't have to buy more. So you've got two different models where both are using the exact same tech, but there's a slight nuance where one will be very attuned to partnering with the grocery chains on how they restock the fridge, but another one is more looking at what you call food waste, which is a slight bit of a nuance to how we consciously consume and how we ethically consume, and also looking at balancing diet and nutrition. So you're looking at the same set of technologies with a slight different nuance. And for me, I think there's a role on corporates on how we assess our business cases, how we look at the value proposition. And what we've done at our end is, if you Google innovation frameworks, so you'll often find the test of innovation is it desirable? Do customers want it? Is it viable? Can a business profit from it? And is it feasible? Can the company do it? They normally say innovation is the nexus between these three. What we've done is we've added a fourth test of innovation, and that is it responsible? So now not only do you say, yep, customers want it, I can make money from it, it's technically feasible. Now we add the fourth test of, is this responsible? Is this something that is good for the now at the detriment of the future? And I believe that corporates need to have these conscious responsibility tests in their business cases. And if we don't, and it's not put as a responsibility for even the corporates besides the individuals, I feel that we will not get the right systemic changes. And this comes down to not philanthropy, but how organizations want to play a role and how their products also need to play a role in enhancing the future.
Thank you. That's great. And again, you made a valid point, and I like to share that in the recent Accenture Ventures Challenge, we had startups competing in 4 segments. We had systems resilience, supply chain resilience, digital commerce, but the 4th one was responsible tech. So it was a new segment which we added this year. And for that, while we had a great set of jury for the first 3 segments, the audience actually was the jury for the responsible tech. And we got a huge overwhelming response on that. So totally agree with you. And I think corporates like us and DBS and many others, Samsung, we need to show how this is happening and, actually walk the talk, which is very, very important.
So Avnish, my only change would be is that if you do your next challenge, I would not keep it as a separate category. It should be inherent in all the other 3 categories. So it's not a category in itself.
First time which we wanted to do. So we just wanted to identify and reward the startups which are doing great work, especially in the pandemic space. And they have, really helped India to address some of the business and human impact of the pandemic. So I think that was the intent, but you are right. At some point of time, it will get integrated. In fact, for the other startups which were in the other segments, one of the questions which we asked them was that how are they using their technology responsibly, right? So for example, if it was an AI, we were asking them, tell us about the explainable AI part of, your thing. So yes, I think all those things, but it is still a start and we need to do a lot more. I think we are running out of time, but I'd like to go to Fee. Fee, I want to ask you that I think as it has become pretty clear that no single entity can solve the problem as far as deep tech is concerned and the impact of deep tech, right? So there is a big role of the ecosystem. And that's what we are seeing today also in the panel with SGInnovate and, government and VCs and corporate startups all coming together. So would you like to give your view on that, where are we, that how big is ecosystem supporting deep tech in solving societal problems, and what can they further do in your view?
Thank you. And I relate a lot to what Vidyut has just spoken about, whether it's tech for good or it's tech for evil. I don't think we should separate the camps anymore, and everything should be about tech for good. So I'm just going to share a bit about the program that we run here in Vietnam starting this year. Using AI and natural language processing, we are building an AI that could speak to every individual in Vietnam. And the common purpose is to update and to personalize education for everyone, especially in those areas where people cannot get education from traditional systems. So, for example, 21st century skills, coding, social skills, skills that would help people and everyone to be integrated into the future. And as we all know, you're all sitting here and you're all tech people, you know a lot about tech, but 99% of the population has no idea what tech is all about and how to actually utilize it to be integrated into the future and to live a happier life, going forward. So our program was about to build that AI to democratize and to also personalize education for free for the 99% of the population that we're talking about who has no idea about the tech business and the tech future. So having said that, this is an example of how investors like myself are working with startups, working with the NGOs, and working with the government all together to actually build this program together. So that is, I think, is a catalyst of change of how all ecosystem stakeholders can get together using open innovation, using deep tech to actually create social for goods.
Well, I think that's great. And one of the, I was just looking at some of the Q&A as well. And one of the questions was exactly what Fee you were talking about, that, can we highlight the collaboration between the ecosystem? I think this is from Manish from Mumbai. And he said, how is industry, research, academia, and the entire ecosystem coming together to solve this problem? So I think that's one of the Q&A which we have taken care of. And I think in the interest of time, probably I can take one more, which could be pretty interesting one. Let me see. So one question is, and I think maybe Dr. Alok or Vidyut, if you want to go with it. Question is, how do we use deep tech to solve sustainability problems, right? How is deep tech being used to actually improve sustainability? So Dr. Alok, maybe you can give a quick comment, and then I'll also like Vidyut to maybe comment on that as well.
I think the UN has put that framework of sustainability very comprehensive, the 17 goals that are there. And many of them I was mentioning about clean water, affordable and clean energy, life underwater. So all of these are quite well covered. These deep tech examples, like the desalination I was talking about, water and the clean energy on the solars, a lot of steps that are being there. What we have done from even Samsung, we have converged those 17 ideas and made Samsung global goals. So it is in the app, in the phone, you can get a Samsung global goals. You can donate, you can support, you can make comments. If you have built technology, you can grow around that. So it's more about awareness, and each of those examples that I talked about, AI, 5G, and many others, could be applied to this framework to improve the life.
Thank you. Vidyut, would you like to make a quick comment?
Sure. I'll just, I just read this recent report, and basically it's, what they do is there's a group of, a number of associations that collect trash from beaches. And what they do is they record all the items that they pick up. And I was reading this report, and the number one item that they were picking up was cigarette butts. So people would smoke and throw the cigarette. And in the recent report, they found that there is so much consciousness that's happening around cigarette smoking, and there's such a movement about the health impacts of cigarette smoking that cigarette butts are no longer the number one trash in a beach. It's food wrappers, health food wrappers. But the point that really got me is that the number of trash items is exactly the same. So what we've done is we've just substituted one trash that people throw at the beach for something else, which sort of pissed me off. It seems that the problem is not tech or the ability or the access of deep tech. Problem is all of us. And I guess that's one thing that we all have to realize and start with is, what are we doing? So there's a personal sustainability agenda that we all have to embrace. So it got me thinking of, I was thinking, okay, there are two S's that we have to replace for another two S's. One is selfishness and stupidity. And we have to really replace that with sincere sustainability. And this goes at a personal, community, and even at a corporate level. It has to be something fundamental, because a corporate is just a collective of people. And the values and the ethos and the strategies of a company is a collective of the people that are within that organization. So if we can start from there, I think the technology will be something that will follow, because we will consciously put it to good use. So if there's a call to action, let's stop the selfishness and stupidity, and let's get a little more sincere and sustainable.
I think we have had a pretty insightful and exciting discussion today in terms of how deep tech can be used for social good. And I think, as we all agree, two things. One, that this is a start. We are all talking about responsible business. We are all talking about responsible tech. We are all talking about changing human behavior. So I think all of this will be critical as we go ahead. And I think the entire ecosystem, as we were discussing, needs to come together. This is not one person's problem. This is not a corporate problem. This is not a startup problem as well. And this is not a government problem also. So the entire ecosystem needs to come together and put their resources and think differently. So I just want to thank my distinguished panelists who came up with really, really great insights in taking this whole discussion forward. It was a pleasure to host you all. And I'll now like to hand back to our organizers, Vimin, for the closure. Thank you.
Thanks to FICCI. Thanks to SGInnovate. Thanks, Avnish.
Thank you, Avnish. Thank you, Avnish, for the wonderful discussion with the speakers. There were just really great points shared by everyone. Great job engaging everyone. I think it is also great to see that there's so many questions posted as well. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer each and every one, but it's still good to see that there's just so much enthusiasm from everyone with regards to deep tech for good in Asia. That being said, I'd just like to represent SGInnovate to thank all the attendees who have stayed with us till now. Big thank you to all our speakers, Dr. Loknath, Bidut, and Fee for the webinar, as well as Dilip. Great insights and discussion points shared by everyone. I think the good reason why we overrun so much is that we really have very, very passionate speakers who is able to share so much on the topic. So we are really, really thankful for that. For the attendees, do keep a lookout for our post-event mail, which will contain a recording of this session. Do reach out to us at events@sginnovate.com if you'd like to connect with any of our speakers or to have a chat with us for any collaboration opportunities. Do also remember to give us your post-event feedback when you exit the webinar or through the post-event mailer as well. So with that, this is Wei Min signing out from this webinar. Hope that everyone will have a great day ahead. Stay safe, stay healthy. Hope to have you again on our next webinar. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Take care. Be safe.